Also, let's keep this free flowing. In other words, if I ask a question, for example, right, some of these could be posed to each one of you. But if you feel like you want to take on a question that's posed to someone else, feel free. We also should not be constrained by just what I'm asking. Feel free to go into adjacencies as well. The more you share, I think it's best for our audience to actually learn more as they walk away from here this evening. Thanks so much. So first, a fundamental question. What, in your opinion, or in your vision, is needed, and why is there a need to reimagine the pharma R&D processes and operations? Why is it that we're talking about reimagining now? Drug development has always been the way it is. It costs the same, it takes the same amount of time, if not longer, if not it costs more, right? And our entire motive is to bring safe, affordable, and effective therapies to patients as quickly as we can. The reimagining part, what do you think about it? Maybe I'll get started with you.
So quickly to introduce myself, as suggested by Ram. So I'm Dr. Nandita Adhikary. I am a medical doctor by education. Have been practicing for about a couple of years, 7 years actually, before moving to the pharma industry. So about 28 years of exposure and experience. I'm here working at Sanofi to developing this R&D. Uh, to your question, Ram, why are we like kind of focusing on GCC now? Because actually, R&D is not so simple. It's the backbone of all the pharma companies, but it is a complex process and an evolving process. So it's important for all the pharma companies to kind of speed up or be at pace with how the surrounding or how the situations are developing. So innovating is very important. Cost and efficiency, definitely we want to bring it to have pace with whatever we are doing or whatever the industry is expecting us to do. Third, definitely there is a need to focus on the talent and hiring the right kind of people and to retain them, train them well, right? And definitely there are other aspects of it, but I will hand over to others to speak about those.
Yeah. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for those of you who stayed. My name is Nataraj Kalyanaraman. I lead the drug development organization here at Bristol Myers Squibb. I'm a medicinal chemist by training, and I've been in pharma for a large, I won't say how many decades, for a large period of time. I think, we Bristol Myers Squibb in Hyderabad, for those of you who may not know, we're relatively new, I would say, to the landscape here. We've been here for about 18 months or so. To go to your question about, why are we talking about this right now, right? So I think, this is a really exciting time from an R&D perspective in pharma. Right? There's never been this diversity in the kinds of modalities we have. I mean, even in the Bristol pipeline, we have multiple cell therapies, we have gene therapies, we have things that are truly transformational. At the same token, if you look at the time it takes, and you were alluding to this, right? The time it takes to go from when a medicine is first in human to when it gets approved, those timelines have not really changed substantially in the last decade. If you look at R&D investment, it's probably doubled in the last decade. So something's not quite right there, right? So we're investing more, still taking us the same amount of time to get medicines to patients. So I think, fundamentally what we are focused on is it's very simple. It's looking to get more medicines to more patients faster. It's very simple. And what we do here in Hyderabad is integrally linked to that mission. Right? That's fundamentally what we're trying to do here. And again, happy to discuss it in more detail. But fundamentally, what we're trying to do is how can we take individual elements of the drug development process that we know are fundamentally inefficient and bring a mix of technology and process improvements to those, largely technology, less process improvement, to try and make those a lot faster. So, but happy to explore that in more detail.
Vivek?
Thank you. Again, maybe take an opportunity to introduce myself a bit. Like, I've been in this industry for almost 19, 20 years, out of which 13 have been with Novartis. And while I was sitting there, I was just counting and looking to the class, how many times people are talking about Novartis, and how many times have been discussed. And I think the number was about 50 times talked something. Now, I have seen this overall industry both as a medical healthcare professional myself when I was practicing, and in 2006 when I started working as a clinical scientist, and now fast forward in 2024, right, when I've been with Novartis for so many years, something is exactly not right, right? As Nataraj was also mentioning, we are investing more, not getting the right efficiency that we should ideally get. But apart from it, there are three things that have happened in the ecosystem, and I would like to just counter those. One thing is there's a lot of disruption that has happened in other industries using the same horizontal. And the horizontal that we're talking about is technology, data that you talked about, right? So the question is, 5 years, 10 years down back, people were going to bank for any transactions, flights, transactions. Now it is so damn easy, right? Why it is not happening in pharma still? Why R&D is still so closed door, not so tech heavy and so on and so forth? So this is question number one, that why we need to reimagine drug development, right? Second thing, as a public health professional, I would say that there's a lot of pressure today on not only on pharma, healthcare professionals, governments, all the stakeholders, that the demand of the society is going beyond what it used to be earlier, just the pill, just the solution, right? Now people are talking about end-to-end solution, the end-to-end platform they're seeing, right? Look at in India, for example, now you can have doctors visiting in your home, right? And the doctors visiting at home, now you can have your diagnostic pretty much done. Lot of prediction out there. Why is it not happening now? And so the specialists there, right, to satisfy the need of stakeholders. That is point number two. The third is the price pressure, right? As you all know, I mentioned about it, we can't sustain with so much of competition around when maybe you're spending 12, 13, 14 years to develop a drug, and then next year some small biotech is coming, maybe from Dinesh Shenoy or somewhere else, right? And you're suddenly out of the market, your market share is down, so you don't have that window of opportunity as much as it used to be maybe 2 decades back. So these are the 3 points I would say, which makes it absolutely necessary for us to think why we need to reimagine culture. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm an outlier here for a few reasons. First of all, I'm a lab guy. So, I've done a physical R&D. I have been always. Second, the only period I spent in GCC was at Novartis 2018-2022. When I was at technical R&D in inaugural. And what I would like to add, I would like to quote what you hear before getting to there. That's a common principle. I think it's applicable to everyone. It doesn't matter how big or how small you are. So the operating principle under modern is very success in the past, but the future you have to adopt, you have to change, you have to transform. Of course, there are multiple transformation agents. Adding a GCC in a country like India certainly helps. No matter what anybody thinks, it's a cost arbitrage. Is also a significant element. And the other part is the cultural amalgamation. That also helps in terms of innovating, finding new ways of doing things, not necessarily confined to a geography or to a center, a development center. When you have GCCs across, that certainly helps in terms of finding new avenues, new ways to collaborate, new ways to do things. Third, I would like to quote COVID again. COVID taught us, people wouldn't have ever developed a vaccine, never happened before. Because mission was important, very nice. And what also followed, black source, tablets. One was preventive, another one was curative. Both medicines were developed at a very rapid pace, and we were studying that, how it was done. It was done in a very smart way, and that's what I'm coming from. The future of drug development has to be smart working. And taking this into example, that people could use data digital for modeling and simulation of the processes of data development. People could use data tools for accelerating the clinical studies. That's how that was achieved And I foresee a lot of things happening on a routine basis, not on this one-off basis, and it has to happen with reimagine or reimagine drug development processes.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it. So I think the key takeaways are, as you said, the competition is intense. Pharma is probably continuously having to rethink its strategy on a very frequent basis now. You got to watch your left flank, your right flank, your rear view mirror, everything else to stay on top, right, and ahead of the competition, if you will. And I think you talked about obviously how quickly we got vaccines to the forefront when the need arose. But then I certainly was listening to a little bit of the panel session done by FDA on the clinical trial transformation initiative. When they said, listen, when we could get a vaccine to market this quickly, why not every other drug?
Yeah.
What did we learn here? What did we do differently here that we could not replicate elsewhere, right? So I think it's just a good discussion to have overall. But thank you so much for that. All right, let's move on to the next one, right? And maybe I'll start with you, Vivek. Novartis. You obviously pioneers, right? As in 55, all right. So you obviously have kind of pioneered, as in you've been here the longest, if you will. But if you look at about the setup and the scaling up of the GCC, what outcomes have you seen thus far? Have they measured up to what your initial objectives were, if you will? If you're able to shed some light, and how do you envision this evolving further ahead as you look ahead? That would be awesome. Thank you.
So, thanks for that. And again, on a mental note, there is some advantage of being first in the ecosystem, right? But then there are a lot of challenges as well that we solve for others, right? Now, has it worked? Have we worked against the objective that we set for ourselves now? I would say definitely yes, right? I think I always quote this as 4C strategy that we have, right? Or what is gave us here, right? One, definitely you start with courage uh, from all the people who are involved in the process of making this shift to go and set up systems. Second is around conviction, because you make some initial mistakes wrong, but then eventually you pick it up, and you need somebody to really back you up. Right? And the third is definitely around the collaboration, right? You need to set it up as a global center, not as a hanging side somewhere in X part of the world, right? But fourth is around the consistent delivery. So consistency is the key here. So year on year, when you're setting it up, there are some expectations, and we have started our journey in 2001 in Mumbai, and now it's 2024. It's ending in few days. Every year there has been some unique objectives that we set for ourselves, right? And as in the previous panel, Mrinal was mentioning that what was your objective in the beginning would be not the same as we have in 2024. So that was part one of your question. Now, second is future, right? As many of you would have noted that maybe people can correct me, but we are the first pharma who has also taken the courage to bring the biomedical research part of Novartis or any big pharma to India. And I mean, our focus is let's see how this ecosystem responds to this step by Novartis. We are already 600 plus associates or employees working in biomedical research in Novartis and outside Novartis with partners like Indegene and others, right? Now, that is one thing that we keep trying, that what we can get through the ecosystem, maximizing the potential. But we are also very focused on pre-competitive talent buildup. And I don't know, maybe taking an opportunity from this platform to talk about Nest by Novartis. This is one of the unique let's say, initiative that we started this year with. Our attempt to give back to ecosystem and also see how we can pave way for overall talent development in terms of AI, data science, medical science, interdisciplinary science, translational research, and so on and so forth. Because for us, the key objective of Future is how to maintain what we have already built in 2023, since 23 years. Yeah. I will pass it on to others for adding.
I know your perspective is from a technical R&D wet lab perspective, but please share some of the outcomes, things that you've seen probably happen at this point in time in terms of measurement of those KPIs. What were the outcomes that you set up successful, and how do you see this panning out for India in general as you look ahead?
So, one thing is increasing the numbers, right? In terms of reducing the load that you can take from the global, in terms of what you can do, how quickly you can do, and how quickly you can do. That's one thing I've seen. But there's a limit for that. So once you achieve that, then next level is okay, what more you can do? It will money more. Always. Okay, I want different roles, I want more roles, I start flowing in. Until a point wherein there is an anxiety that is made up in that office. Right? That's where I think things start slowing down. And one thing that we realize, what I have seen, at least in the lab setup, is the quality and compliance aspect. It doesn't matter whether it's a whichever company like this, right? Whether it's an Indian company or a multinational company, no matter what, you have a uniform culture. But there is a local culture influence that will have in terms of quality compliance that will also have in integrity. So that's where I have seen things start falling apart. And that's one thing people have to be cautious about in terms of how to integrate that carefully while building a team. And that's what is sustainable benefit in terms of meeting your overall objectives.
Thank you, Nataraj.
Yeah, I just want to add maybe, I mean, as one of the companies that's been here for a relatively short period of time, right? I think, frankly, the model of building a drug development organization in India, even when we entered, we knew it was de-risked, right? It's not like building an organization that can do drug development is no longer a big feat, right? It's been done over and over and over again. It can be done at scale. You can attract talent. You can deliver a lot of value, right? I think now what's really exciting is we're at that point where there's enough, and I love the comment I think a gentleman made in the prior panel about the ecosystem, right? I think we're at the point where there's enough of an ecosystem that's sort of brewing here. And that's partly through the different peer pharma, it's partly through organizations like T-Hub, partly through organizations like Indegene, where I think you can fundamentally challenge the notion of what does innovation mean, right? So when I think about the notion of innovation, I think there's sort of like broadly three steps there, right? One is kind of can you do the same quality of work that was delivered somewhere else in the world at a lower price point? The sort of notion of frugal innovation, which I think at this point we should all probably feel like that can be done, right? I mean, yes, operationally you have to deliver, but it can be done, right? That's not something that is an unknown. I think now we're sort of moving to the second stage where can you essentially deliver the same level of innovation that exists in other parts of the world where the differentiator is no longer price point. The differentiator is the fact that you're delivering cutting edge innovation, right? So I think that's the second stage. And I feel like we're getting to that point even at Bristol in a relatively short period of time. We have some capabilities that exist only in Hyderabad, that don't exist anywhere else in the world. And these aren't things that we have ever done through third parties. They've always been internal capabilities, core capabilities. So we're building capabilities like that. And I think the next step really will be kind of like, can we actually do things here as a in a consortium? I heard consortium. I know there's a lot of work there that can be world leading, and that's not easy, right? I think it's a question of when and where will we get there, but I think that should be sort of the holy grail relative to kind of where we are so far.
Thank you, Nataraj. Greatly appreciate that. Thank you for that. Maybe, Nandita, I'll switch over to you very quickly for a question. This is about, like, let's say if somebody wants to embark on this journey now, thinking about GCC and so on and so forth. Obviously, we just heard, right, through the course of the earlier sessions that this happens to be the central place of attracting so much of large pharma. Now, the mid-tier pharma and biotech, etc., looking forward to it. What would your advice be? What should they consider? This is about R&D processes and operations. Reimagining those and setting up a GCC. In that construct, what would your advice be?
So thank you so much for that question, and very relevant in this scenario because there are different set of challenges when we are starting first, and the challenges that we face when we are beginning now. Yeah, considering everything, definitely talent is one thing that we should always be focused on. Uh, for us, while we are in the phase of building up, it's like acquiring talent. In a couple of years, it will be more like retention of the talent. Second, when I have to talk about it, regulatory scenarios are changing a lot. We have to keep in pace with the regulatory scenarios. We have to be compliant with the things that needed to be set up. Third, what I will talk about is basically we have to definitely also look at how our innovation or digital innovation that is playing part like AI and ML. And fourth, I will talk about it's very important that we collaborate across, right, and collaborate or partner with different parties to make it successful.
Thank you. Nataraj, I know in the previous panel session, Suraj mentioned about the basic incubation period being about 7 years or so, if I heard him right. What would you think? What's your advice for a biopharma wanted to embark? Like, in other words, what have you seen thus far for yourselves?
Yeah.
In which case, what would your advice be?
Yeah, I think the prior panel covered this topic really well. I mean, the only thing I would say is I think that the cycles are getting faster, right? I think it's very evident. What perhaps took a company 10 years to build, I think given, I mean, and frankly, they were sort of, it's the phrase, right? You're standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, there is a lot of talent already that has worked in global companies, that is frankly very accustomed to doing drug development, and there is a substantial scale of talent in India as a whole, right? So I think those cycles are going to start to get shorter and shorter. I don't want to underestimate the operational complexity of building a sustainable organization, right? That's not something you should ever overlook. But I think for all of us, like the question would be, what does that cycle time look like moving forward? I also heard in the prior panel, right, some this kind of notion of getting executive buy-in. I think increasingly that my sense is that is happening, right? That's the reason why there are so many companies on the street, because that executive buy-in is happening a lot easier because again the model is not like unproven anymore. So I think for us to kind of keep our eye on is, how can we accelerate through those cycles and kind of get to a place where there's this sort of sense of like, what is the GCC of the future or whatever. I think I saw that on some of the panels. Look, what does that actually look like, right? I mean, how can you go from a philosophy to actually seeing that in practice? I think that part will be quite interesting.
Great, thank you. I know that there was a question from Amit in the audience on the previous panel session, right? I think the reference was about, again, talking about talent in general. There was a lot of that addressed.
Yeah.
And then there was talk about pharma nomenclature. We are notorious for acronyms, right? It's so complex. So how do you ensure that the skill sets are kind of done, or at least the knowledge is important in a manner that when you're inducting talent, right, you're able to explain all of that very clearly. And what's your process? What's your setup for such a thing? Maybe you can kick it off and let's see if Vivek can add to this.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a really good point, and we do also do quite a bit of, I see two flavors of it, right? One flavor is sort of the BMSizing all the jargon, right? Which frankly is not such a great thing, but it is a reality, and so we do some of that. We also do, I think, more importantly, how can we fundamentally upskill the talent, right? So, like for example, I mentioned, there's new modalities coming into play, protein degradation, brand new way of thinking about how you integrate a target, cell therapy, again, brand new modality or newish now modality. So we do quite a bit by way of training programs in terms of ensuring that people that we hire are keeping up with what's happening in the ecosystem broadly, right? In the science, we see, by the way, one thing that we hear a lot is people want to they want to obviously know what they're doing day to day, but just as importantly, they want to kind of lift their heads up and see what's happening in the broader world. And one huge area for us, especially in R&D, that keeps people engaged is the science, right? A lot of people come to R&D to do really good science, right? And that's fundamentally the more, good talent wants to do good science, and good science makes good medicines. So the more you can kind of, emphasize the point of good science, that's really critically important. So like one thing we've done a lot of is not just the question of like how you're doing something, but why you're doing it and what are you doing, right? Those are all critical elements to re-emphasize.
Great, awesome. Maybe over to you. Given that it's a wet lab and the technical R&D expertise and background that you have, when we talk about learning, inducting, coaching, skilling, acronyms, jargon, getting past all that, what's been your strategy, if you will? What do you think that needs to be done more over and above what's happening so that we can kind of gain momentum in getting into that side of GCC setup as well?
So the first part always has been unlearning. Because in terms of people come from different background, most of the people that you get here are from generic background. The first part that we used to do was unlearning. Leave your previous learning outside the gate. We will train you here. Second was emphasis on quality compliance and particularly the values and behavior part. That's the soft part of it, but that plays an important role in terms how to integrate, how to kind of harmonize the pool. But biggest challenge that we had seen and that continues to be where I think Suraj mentioned about it is in terms of holding the people back, because it's not just the generation Z or anybody. Everybody gets impatient. So it's important to normalize the expectations right from day one. I mean, that's the big thing that the GCCs or MNCs have to do, must do, because whatever growth trajectory that you see in outside world in India, in an Indian company or the Indian multinational or other multinational companies, like there is a rapid growth trajectory. That's not going to happen. So first, you have to focus on science, doing the things right, do it in such a way that it is meeting the quality compliance expectations. At the same time, you have to have this calibration of your career growth. If you don't do it, you may attract, but you will lose, and then this war of talent poaching will continue. But some point of time, what I'm already seeing is people who jumped around uh, from GCC to GCC, they are already hitting a tipping point because they were kind of not ready there. They were kind of um, got in very early. They have reached a scale in terms of it's a disproportionate in terms of years of experience and what package they get. They have hit a point where it's very frustrating. And some of the GCCs also have started kind of normalizing the workforces, and that's where the people get into bigger trouble. So, my advice again, I just want to add one more point for your previous question. What would you advise? Um, Please define the site missions very carefully, very clearly, and make it clear to people right from day one. What is this site is going to do? What is your other sites are going to do? How you're going to collaborate with each other, so that people coming in there having absolute clarity what's my mission. Especially the senior people, what will happen when you hire them senior, they have certain excitement for a couple of years, and after that then they see a glass ceiling above them, and then you tell them that okay, your next role is in your other location. Maybe some of them cannot go, some of them may be willing to go, but some of them may not be able to go, but they'll get then very frustrated. So that's one thing I would like to add in terms of define that site mission upfront and make it absolutely clear.
Yeah. So just you want to go?
So I just wanted to add on training and upscaling that you were talking about. So what has worked for us is the bite-sized learning that my colleague has also mentioned in the earlier panel discussion, as well as utilization of the artificial intelligence. Right, having a platform where you can ask your quick questions and get the answers quickly. Right, today's generation is very fast and they want everything at their fingertips. So having such kind of engines that can help them learn things faster is very helpful.
Just to add only 2 points, right? What has been said, right? First is that knowledge is available today, so we don't have to really be worried about availability of knowledge in the ecosystem. We need to also acknowledge that R&D is a little tough than what we say, right? I mean, it's not rocket science, but little less than rocket science, but it's really deep science. So I think our expectation that everybody should know exactly all the economics, all the medical pathology, all the pathophysiology is not it's a real expectation. So in my humble opinion, what is the gap is what undergraduates, postgraduates study in their courses, are they able to link how their knowledge can add value to the drug development life cycle? This is a big gap. Medical schools or pharma schools, even IITs, wherever you go, if you throw them the real life problem, maybe I'm not sure if they get one-to-one match, right? So I think that's where I would say, as GCCs, the pharmas, the companies, we have an obligation to maybe bridge the gap. Right? So that will be solved. Number one, that will point number one. Now, the point number two is for upskilling of the people inside, right? It is very important for us to somehow create an environment where people feel that they can grow cross-functionally also. I think one of the drawback that in the medical science or the science field has, everyone feel they are very special, right? So if you talk to somebody who's MD cardiology versus MD pharmacology, MD neurology, there's already big barriers, and you will see those in companies also, right? Discovery is better, development is less better, R is special. So we have to break those barriers. That really limits our upskilling efforts. And I have personally experimented many such initiatives, and Dinesh would know many of it as well, right? During our Novartis period, it really works. Most of the people who could go to the medical school, engineering school, are above average IQ, I would assume, and they are ready to pick up things if you train them well. So these are the 2 points I would say. Tap early on, fill the gap, course versus applicability. The second is while upskilling, break those barriers which is inhibiting the upskilling.
Just make one comment, actually two comments. One, I think I really liked your point around there is no degree in drug development, right? I mean, drug development draws from all kinds of different disciplines. So I do think having a robust sort of training program is really important. And I think some companies do that really well, where you can have intake from all kinds of different disciplines, you train them up, etc. And I think that's something that can be done in a much more structured, like non-company specific manner, right? And I know there's some, through the consortium, there's some efforts there. I think that's fantastic. I think the other comment I'd make also around the talent war comment, right? So to me, to me, war connotes that there's a winner and a loser, right? I like to think of it as talent competition. Competition makes all of us stronger. Now I realize that with where we are right now, it may not feel like a competition, it might feel like a war, but I think fundamentally, if we take that approach, then longer term, that's a very positive thing, right? So I think I don't like using the word war. It just feels a very like it's always like a very one directional sort of way of describing it.
No, I think it's a great point, right? I think as you all observed, and I think we've heard through the course of this evening, it kind of appears perhaps like we're competing for a resource pool that's contained, right, and it's limited. But
Yeah.
what in essence we are doing is perhaps creating an ecosystem and expanding it.
Exactly.
It's only that later years when we look back, we say this is the discussion we had this evening,
Yeah.
and then this is what the end outcome of this is when the capacity has gone up and more biopharma are actually taking advantage of it. The other thing I heard certainly Jayesh ji talk about is availability of task, for example. And Vivek, you pointed out certain things as to saying, if the academic curriculum has certain gaps, and if you say bridging that gap between academia curriculum to what the industry is requiring, that can be done. Perhaps folks like yourself should get involved in some way. I mean, this is what the academia is expecting,
Yeah.
and the T-Hub and the government is actually willing to probably support and encourage some of that. So perhaps this is bridge to be created there.
Thanks, Ram. And just to add, right? Any guess how many students graduate from India every year in STEM? It is 2.2 million plus, which is sufficient for all the GCCs in the world for next 5 years to come, right? The gap is how many of those convert UG into PG, then PG to PhD, and the PhD to postdoc. So my humble opinion and invitation to all of us here is, please give back a little bit to academia. I'm very passionate about this topic, right? That's what I'm taking mic over and again. But you have really big pool of people. Talk to your MBBS graduates. They have zero clue about what drug development is, zero clue about clinical research, right? If you train them well, you have many people who could do a lot of medical writing for you, clinical operations for you, clinical development for you, right? So I like the point what Nataraj said. It's not war, it's about really healthy competition. And if you really believe on the economics principle, it says it has to be no monopoly, no oligopoly, but rather perfectly competitive market that is best for society also. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. At this point, I would really like to thank Government of Telangana. I was really not aware of such kind of support that is being provided for us to generate talent, early talent, mid talent, senior talent. So there have been a couple of programs. So I was really happy to hear that we are generating talent pool. It will no longer be a competition, or even if it is a competition, we will continue to generate pool for everyone. Yeah.
Agree 100%. Did you want to add something? Okay. And I know that Vivek, you and I, last year, I believe, we were at the School of Public Health in Manipur. The conversation was about setting up a core structure for health technology assessments, right? Great initiative.
Yep.
They pulled in academia, industry,
Yes.
folks like us, for example, right? And we had a good discussion on that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think more of that should be done at a larger scale.
Yep.
Agreed. So I'll go on to perhaps the operating model, folks, and change management, aligning with global R&D teams to the GCC model, right? That could be challenging. A lot of companies could struggle to get that right. If there is a disconnect there, you may not be able to get to your goals. So how do you envision that part, that alignment, right? While the stakeholder involvement and the sponsorship is there, but that needs to be handled very carefully. The operating model, getting that right is vital, right? I will leave any of you to comment on it. Maybe maybe Nataraj. I know you're getting started. If you
Yeah.
let me go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. I mean, I think, look, it starts fundamentally with, I mean, somebody mentioned this, with sponsorship, right? So we've been very fortunate at Bristol where we have had the luxury of having very strong executive level sponsors, right? So essentially this has started at the level of the leadership of the company. So we've been very fortunate in that regard. I think the second thing after sponsorship is the vision, and you mentioned it very well. So I think the vision has to be something that one has to be credible, and it has to be something that every employee in the organization can feel, right? So you can say, if you say that your vision is to be an innovative organization, but all you're doing is manual work that nobody else wants to do, that doesn't really jive with the vision, right? So I think that's something that the leadership of the organization here, but certainly the leadership of the organization as a whole, has to be very very aligned with. And the way we have thought about this is, whatever we work on in BMS Hyderabad is actually critical business problems, right? So like we haven't taken the approach of saying that we're gonna prioritize all the problems for the company and we work on the bottom third or whatever, right? That's not the approach we've taken. The approach we've taken is that we will work on the problems of the company. Now that doesn't mean that we will only work on the top third either. It means that there will be some things we work on that are in the bottom third. There will be some things we work on that are in the top third. There will be some things, maybe a lot of things that we work on that are in the middle third, right? But I think fundamentally that's the vision that we've had for the organization. We've been very transparent about it. And we've told our employees that this is sort of what we envision, not just employees here, but employees globally, that this is what we envision in terms of the operating model. There are obviously, growing pains, and it's something that you continue to kind of watch, and you continue to kind of want to have very open discussions around that, because it's not a trivial change for an organization. Especially for an organization that's sort of starting this from scratch and then, going up the maturity curve. It's certainly a journey, but I think if you stay true to that vision, and I think you are very credible in terms of how that's being operationalized, you communicate that effectively, I think that's the journey then you can take. And I think then everyone's kind of on the same page. I think where it falls apart obviously is any one of those things, if it's not done effectively, I think those are where the gaps start to creep in.
Thank you. So maybe I'll add upon what my colleague Nidal has already said. It is very important that we have the buy-in from our global leaders, from our executive, how they are considering these GCCs. Are they considering them as an integrated part of the global vision, or is it just like a function that they are trying to develop here? So this global buy-in part of the global vision would be very important for us to kind of maintain, sustain, and definitely grow these GCCs that we are trying to develop.
So Felix, yeah, go ahead.
One story that I heard, again, talking about sponsorship. Sometimes we have a democratic way of doing it, by people. But what I was told, the Genome Valley, the TRD, Technical R&D in Genome Valley, which is actually today the second largest technical R&D to Novartis. Okay. It was vision of one man, Stefan Lang. He bit the bullet. He said, make it happen. We are going to go there no matter what, because there was a lot of debate going on. He said, okay, no matter what, we are going to make it. Number one. Number two, everybody is going to support and make it successful. And by the time I had joined, it was already 8 years into it, because we celebrated 10th year when I was there. By the time I joined, the mission given to me by my boss was make it more self-reliant. So that it's not that you're disconnecting from your headquarters. I mean, this is part of your change management, right? You get roles, but make those roles self-reliant. That happens only by giving freedom, giving training, defining the principles, and then enabling them to work more independently.
Vivek, maybe while you add to it, a quick extension and a follow-up of the same question. Cultural alignment, company culture obviously is a vital component in that thing. Some of these companies have been around for a long time, right, at a global scale, right? When you bring that thing in, how do you ensure that the cultural alignment is spot on? Any deviation from that would cause turbulence.
You're right. I think I like the word spot on, right? And I hope that we ever achieve that situation anywhere in the world where everything is aligned spot on, right? That should be aspiration. But if you think about it, even if you want to make a house, what color do we choose on the walls? We have to take alignment, right? And alignment is, by the way, one of the words which we hate at Novartis anymore because you can see the paint from all the panels, right? So the thing is, we have to accept it with a bitter, whatever truth, right? That this is when you work in a complex environment where there are a lot of stakeholders which your process or your system is going to impact. It is the best way to do is to bring people along, right? As Dinesh mentioned, there has to be someone who's to say, hey, you know what, we are going east or west, wherever, right? And then people should rally. But then on the path, in my humble opinion, again, right, my personal opinion, that it is better that you bring along people who should be part of the journey, because remember, one man can take a decision and we can rally behind, but this is delivered by a lot of scientists, right? 400 plus scientists in Genome Valley today who are working day and night on each of the Novartis product that is being analyzed today across the globe, right? So I think we have to accept it, and how to do it. The culture, it can, any new thing can be learned by proper training. Number one, number two, proper reiteration, right? Why it is important for us to understand how Americans operate versus how Japanese operate versus we operate, right? We all, those who have gone to B school, there's a proper subject on that for a reason, right? So that you understand, first of all, know about it, because if you don't know about it, there's no chance that you can be spot on there. Number two, even if you know about it, you have to practice it constantly, right? So I think these are the only two things that we encourage in our organization. And but yeah, we have to be standing with the people, because even after you train them, retrain them, there could be sometimes gaps which we have to fill, right? I hope everybody is feeling the same, right, in our organization. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Vivek. So, Nataraj, I can't resist asking this question. While reimagining R&D processes and operations, right, within your GCC, how do you envision using technology now? Artificial intelligence, ML, now generative AI. And what are the burning issues you're looking to solve? Just functionally also, if you cannot double click and share too much detail,
Yep.
it will be very helpful for this audience to hear. Particularly, I think Sujit sir did talk about the fact that we have a center of excellence here for AI, ML, and so on and so forth, right?
Yep.
It'd be amazing to hear from you.
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So when we were establishing the organization here, intentionally the two functions that we established were drug development and technology, right? And so we didn't have drug development and medical affairs or drug development and research, because I think fundamentally we feel like those two functions need to work together from a co-location perspective to kind of make this happen. So I'll just give you a couple of statistics in terms of like, what the problem statement could look like. So industry-wide, when we open up clinical sites for our clinical trials, close to a quarter of sites we open don't enroll a single patient, right? I mean, and for oncology trials, a vast majority of sites enroll between 5 and 7 patients. These are all statistics by Tufts and McKinsey, right? So this is all public information. So, I think the sorts of things we're trying to tackle is how, if we were to be able to decrease that number from a quarter to, let's say, 10%, which is still a pretty big number, that just the level of speed we could have from an enrollment perspective could be substantial. So, I think you alluded to some of the technologies that are kind of starting to come, to become much more prime time. I think fundamentally a few things have been, in my view, a hurdle in terms of technology adoption and drug development. Right? So one has been a regulatory bar, And I think through the pandemic and other things, I think we see much more of an acceptance there. So that's fantastic. I think fundamentally data fluency has been a gap, and that's been getting better over time. But then now that, but a lot of what we do in drug development is actually writing documents, right? So there's always been kind of this barrier where you've had data, but you needed to be able to sort of use some sort of NLP engine or something to be able to translate that into actual documents. And I think through the advances in Gen AI, I think there is actually a lot of potential there. And we start to see this even in the work that we're doing, where, I think, we saw earlier, right, a whole speech written by Gen AI, which was pretty good. So I think the technology is kind of getting to a place where, it feels like we're sort of at this pivot point where it's sort of getting ready for prime time. And then the final thing, the final hurdle, I think, has always been, at least in my experience, there's kind of been the sort of valley of death between ideation and implementation. Lots of really great ideas. You do a POC, POC seems to work, but can you actually get large scale adoption of that idea? And actually, can you now start to capture the value, right? And I think that's another area that we're focusing on very heavily, where we have the ability now with associates who are very eager to start to employ these sorts of tools at scale. So we're very optimistic that we can start to actually see the value capture versus doing a whole host of POCs that then sort of die on the vine.
Thank you. Did you want to add something? All right, folks. So I think, Vivek, you went in that direction already, which is you talked about sustainable biomedical research, right? Perhaps it's NIBR, that now you call it being perhaps the second largest center here in Genome Valley. Where do you think we could go with this kind of a GCC setup? Today we're talking about reimagining R&D from an operational perspective and process perspective. Could this potentially lead eventually to creation of novel molecules, becoming, from transforming India from being a hub of generic manufacturers to novel NCE manufacturers, if you will, for the world? I mean, where do you see this headed? What's your thought?
Yeah, you see smile, right? I would love to see that one day for sure, right? Why not? So 5 or 6 years back, when I started this strategic initiative, and my colleagues, Dinesh was a part of the leadership team then, I know how many times I had to go and pitch this idea to the people, right? Because we have to understand the ecosystem now, right? The ecosystem is very well known globally for the digital savviness, the mathematics, and the quantitative skills. The ecosystem is also very well known for the chemistry part of it, right? So we have the molecular bank here in IICT, which is one of the largest in the world, right? So reverse engineering of chemistry, etc. But we are not yet known for biology. We are not yet known for understanding the pathophysiology completely and ability to find out new whether bispecific will work or whether CAR-T will work. We have not seen that happening yet in India, right? So that is there. So that's a big challenge. However, from the report that I read, again, I understand that Korea in this Asia Pacific region, apart from China, Korea and India are seen to be, maybe there's a chance to lead the way in the biotech space. Biosimilar for sure is maybe a little bit acknowledged. With some emergence of CAR-T therapy, especially the Immunoact, I don't know, you heard about this small startup based in Mumbai, IIT Bombay, is grown up there, really bringing CAR-T therapy for the people at 1/10 of the cost, right, globally. So these are some early indicators, and with new revised bioethics policy that government of India has launched, we are hoping that some steps will be taken in that direction. But to me, although there are a lot of positive indicators, right, that you see in last year we have really increased multi-folds by number of publications that our academia is doing, number of investments that companies like Biocon, etc. have done for academia. But for me, still the path is a little bit far with respect to really getting a novel molecule in the next 5 years. Probably, I don't see that. Maybe I'm missing a lot of things. But things will move in that direction as the economy will grow, as if we are reaching our target of 2047 to be a developed nation. I also want and I hope that this happens. Now, coming to Novartis, right? So, what our aspirations are that, let's say we have 600-700 people engaged today in the biomedical research part of it, right? Various capacities, right? internal versus external. We will see how the journey will be. Will it be like 23-year journey of development, or as Nataraj was mentioning, that everyone is looking to reduce the cycle time to be at a mature level. So let's see where it goes. But I'm very optimistic about things, right? So and I hope that before I retire, there should be some molecules coming out of India.
Thank you, Vivek. Does anyone else?
So there is the biggest strength of this Eugia Pharma. A, formulation science. Second is process chemistry. And life cycle management is a big deal in pharma, brand management. And I've never seen yet, I'm yet to see somebody coming in and then taking advantage of that availability, abundant and availability, and the speed with which you can achieve it. Example, twice daily oral tablet, we can convert it to once daily. We can deliver in 5 or 6 months to 1 year max. So that talent is abundantly available, and those also can add more life to your product. In terms of extending or a second layer of protection in terms of extending your growth. Second, I want to quote an example for process chemistry. Valsartan is not good, and that is the sole reason where we have the nitrogen plus in this world. That's why it burst. This company in Hyderabad release, which had a process which could produce valsartan without any nitrogen. They were the only company that had a process. Okay? So, again, release is catering to a lot of brand companies. But how many releases are there? How many releases we can create in this country? Because our strength is process. We can create the same molecule, a different process, with greater purity or less impurity.
Fantastic example. That's extremely exciting, and again, the party therapy that you're talking about is exciting. I think bodes well for us and generally the world over, if you will. With that, let's see. Maybe we can switch over to the audience to see if they have any questions for the panelists here.
So the second question first. I mean, I don't think it's sustainable. It's pretty straightforward. I think, look, it's one of those things, right? I mean, in most of the world, there's increasingly this thing of like, I used to be in academia, and we used to say publish or perish. So it's sort of like that. Like you have to innovate, otherwise somebody else is going to innovate, and you're going to lose your competitive differentiation and edge. And there's lots of examples of companies that didn't innovate. Kodak and Blockbuster and whatnot. So I think that's straightforward, and I think in general companies understand that. I think the first question is a little bit harder to address, right? I think it's not like we haven't innovated, right? So if you think about when I started, like 15 years ago, when I was in early clinical development, and we used to do data review, I remember that teams used to look at Excel spreadsheets and look at data, line by line, and I think we've done a lot there to try to simplify things like data review. We've done a lot, by the way, in terms of I was talking to a gentleman in PV, and how you think about how you manage a safety database, how do you do single case processing. I mean, a lot of that stuff we've actually done quite well. I think there are two elements that come to mind in terms of like things we need to solve for. So I think one element is a lot of the innovation has been point solutions, right? So we've done RPA bot here or something else somewhere else, that sort of thing. And those things kind of work for that particular use case, but we have not been able to necessarily connect all of those bots and scale systematic solutions, right? So I think that's one area, especially as innovation is catching up. I think that's an area we can do more in. I think the other thing I would also say is some of the things we're trying to solve for, they're not trivial. And it's not like they have been solved elsewhere and we're lagging, right? I mean, I think some of the things we're trying to solve for, they are difficult solutions, and I think we need to sort of acknowledge that and give ourselves some credit that we're trying to go after things that are pretty difficult to solve for, and we have a healthy level of skepticism in terms of how long it will take to get there. Right? Even for things like there's hallucinations, you don't have hallucinations when you're writing the safety narrative. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. You don't want to have like some safety finding that doesn't exist that then the FDA comes back with, and you have a major issue. So I think that's the other part I would say. Let's take a deliberate approach in terms of the way we try to solve for this. And I'm very optimistic. With the tools we have the potential to really address these in the next several years.
Thank you so much. So to me, innovation is also simplification, reducing dependency, and then the efficiency in the process. But on top of it, it is also important that with changing regulatory scenario, are we compliant with it? Can we innovate as well as be compliant with the requirement of the health? Yes, so these are two critical factors when we are looking towards innovation.
So I think, look, maybe I'll divide this, my response to two parts, right? How this ecosystem is going, and how we, maybe Novartis, right? So thanks for this question. So obviously, from the ecosystem perspective, uh, as the as many reports are saying, right? So we are in a very sweet spot right now as a country, as a country, but also at a very let's say risky spot as well if you don't utilize the opportunity, right? So most of you know that we are really maximizing right now on our demographic dividend, which is still open for, let's say, 2042 or 52, right? After that, as per the demographic transition model, we will have maybe aging population and so on and so forth, which means that now this talent pool, the people who are available workforce for the world will have to be really educated, trained, and available with skills and competencies to deliver on many global things, right? That is very big opportunity for India, and that is one of the push that the white paper says that can help us to become a developed country, right? And that's why you see a lot of investment coming in, as Nataraj was mentioning, as Nandita mentioned, right? But let's say if this doesn't happen, right? What will happen is if we miss out the train. So we have a lot of population, but they are not ready to be employed. This is not going to help. This is going to then work against the economy because they are not contributing actively to the GDP, and that's where the chances are that you miss out on the demographic window, which many countries in the world have missed previously. If you take the historical data of let's say 2 centuries, right? So that is my response to the ecosystem, and I believe that we are continuously growing more than 5%, 6% GDP rate. I hope we continue to move on with that, right? And hopefully pharma will get its share as well, right? As you know, India industry is driven mostly by IT industry, but then pharma is also catching up. Not as fast, but like Indegene, you and IPO recently, right? Well, right? So you see a lot of companies entering into the now about Novartis, right? We love experimentation, and that's why we started with biomedical research. We are really hoping to strengthen this ecosystem in partnership with our GCC partners, the pharma partners. Hopefully, everybody joins in. We are in discussion with whosoever we can talk to strengthen this ecosystem so that maybe 5 years, 10 years down the line, this ecosystem will be very strong so that we can imagine a center that we have in Boston for Novartis in India somewhere. Why not? I mean, who stops it? Maybe BMS will have, maybe Sanofi will also have. And just imagine if we have such centers. One day, therapies can also come out, and I hope by that time our tax regimes and all those things, which really impacts the decision, makes it. This will be my response.